This book takes up stories of presence and how they enliven our lives and imaginations, and consider the complications of historical and contemporary Indigenous experience in these lands. 4 critical questions form the core chapters of this book, questions that continue to shape much of my approach to Indigenous studies generally, and to Indigenous literature more specifically. While the historical and political work of the broader discipline is vitally important to give context and content to the work of literary scholars, I fundamentally believe that the study of Indigenous writing offers us something different, a complementary but distinctive way of thinking about Indigenous belonging, identities, and relationships. Though born and raised in Colorado, connected by heritage, kinship, friendship, and ceremony to Oklahoma, and formally trained in Indigenous literary studies and history in Nebraska, I've been in Canada since 2002, where I've learned from and shared intellectual and interpersonal nourishment with Musqueam, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Cree, Inuit, Mi'kmaq, Métis, Lakota, Kwagu, Tahltan, and Dene people, among many others. In my Indigenous Lit and Indigenous Studies courses, in conference rooms, community centers, and around the kitchen tables of family and friends in Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, New Hampshire, Michigan, Georgia, Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, British Columbia, Australia, England, and elsewhere, our discussions have often come back to the challenges, possibilities, and complexities of kinship and belonging, as much in our relationships to one another as to the world we share. The questions that structure the core of this book have emerged from these conversations and considerations, and offer what I think to be particularly productive and provocative ways of approaching this diverse body of work. I'm suspicious of claims of universal values between all Indigenous peoples around the world, as such broad assertions too often gloss over real and meaningful distinctions between communities, regardless of whatever else they may share. These claims are all too easily weaponized in colonialist authenticity debates against Indigenous individuals and groups. Yet these 4 questions do seem to me a good way of getting to some of the more widely held ideas about relationship, kinship, respect, and responsibility that Indigenous peoples articulate separately and together. Examining them as questions makes room for the specificities of our diverse experiences. It also, I hope, keeps us humble, since considering these as processes leaves room for learning, growing, changing, and remembering. They're not fixed in time or place, but help us maintain better relations to both. The book's 4 guiding questions are: 1. How do we learn to be human? What are the experiences, customs, traditions, and ceremonies that define our humanity? How do we realize the full potential of our physical and imaginative human embodiment with healthy bodies, minds, and hearts? 2. How do we behave as good relatives? What are our relational rights and responsibilities to one another and to the other than human world? How do our literatures help us realize these relations in meaningful ways? 3. How do we become good ancestors? How do we create the kind of world and relationships that will nurture those who come after, and give them cause to thank us rather than curse or grieve our destructive selfishness? And what does literature do to help guide this work? 4. How do we learn to live together? What are the social and intellectual structures, conventions, and considerations that reduce or manage conflicts and encourage harmonious relations across our various categories of difference? How do our stories offer helpful models for those efforts? The concept of the good noted above deserves a bit of attention here. Good in these questions isn't a prescriptive measurement presuming a singular state of moral rightness, but is rather a concept intended to be expansive. Yet I do believe that considering the status of our moral relations is important, and I hope that the associated discussions and readings may offer multiple approaches to the good through consideration of those ideas, behaviors, and relationships that are healthy and affirming of human and other than human dignity, while challenging those that are toxic, violent, and demeaning. There are no specific answers to any of these questions. Or rather, there are many answers, depending on contexts of culture, community, land, and history. They're broad questions, but significant ones, which ask us to attentively consider our relationships to one another and to the world.